All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for waiting. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Assistant Secretary Patrick Murphy. He'll be talking about the Secretary's trip to Southeast Asia. We are on the record, but we are embargoing until the end of the press conference, please, so no live tweeting. And we'll run for about 30 minutes. We'll start with some opening remarks and then take questions. With that, I'll turn it over to Deputy Assistant.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be with you this morning. I am freshly back from Manila and very pleased to share with you some observations on our diplomacy in the Asia Pacific over the last week and a half or so. This was Secretary of State Tillerson's first opportunity to engage in Southeast Asia with ASEAN and our partners, but not his first time to engage with ASEAN. He has hosted the foreign ministers here in Washington and the ambassadors of the 10 ASEAN countries. So for the third time he was engaging them, but the first time in Southeast Asia itself as Secretary of State. And he and the United States had about 4 objectives going into these meetings in Manila. First was to demonstrate the U.S. commitment to the Asia-Pacific region. Secondly was to advance our key security priorities in the multilateral fora that are offered through ASEAN. Third, strengthen our alliances and partnerships. And fourth, underscore our commitment to a rules-based approach to the region. We believe the results were quite excellent, both through our multilateral meetings and through a series of bilateral engagements, as well as additional visits beyond Philippines to Thailand and to Malaysia. What we succeeded in doing was advancing progress in 3 preeminent priority areas: countering the threat of North Korea's missile programs, achieving stability in the South China Sea, and fighting international terrorism. These ASEAN-centered meetings are quite elaborate. There are quite a few of them. There's an alphabet soup of different mechanisms, but they serve as the backbone of our regional security architecture in the Asia Pacific. It's a very strategic opportunity to discuss challenges and to seek agreement and consensus with dozens of partners. Collectively, the countries represented in Manila have about 5 billion people behind them. This is roughly 2/3 of the world that were represented there in Manila, so quite significant in terms of a gathering. So first, a few observations on the multilateral engagements on the North Korea. On the eve of the regional meetings took place on August 6th and 7th. On the very eve, on August 5th, the ASEAN foreign ministers representing the 10 countries of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations released their strongest statement to date. Their joint statement expressed grave concerns over the escalation of tensions and recent missile tests, and the statement came prior to the August 5th UN Security Council resolution that emerged in New York. From our perspective, ASEAN rightly put the responsibility for these tensions squarely on the DPRK's shoulders. ASEAN ministers expressed commitment to a denuclearized Korean peninsula, urged North Korea to completely and immediately comply with all relevant UN Security Council resolutions, including the latest from August 5th. We welcome this strong, principled statement. It echoes the concerns of the international community and the unanimous view of the UN Security Council. It put ASEAN in very good standing, at one with a strong voice, matching the rest of the international community. Those meetings in Manila demonstrated that the international community is in full agreement. North Korea's behavior is dangerous, and North Korea found itself completely isolated at the discussions in Manila. On the South China Sea, the ASEAN foreign ministers also released a joint communique, and in that communique they underscored their commitment to peace and stability in the disputed South China Sea. Foreign Minister's statement affirmed importance of the freedoms of navigation and overflight. It also emphasized the peaceful resolution of disputes, respect for international law, in particular, the law of the sea. Quite notably, the communiqué also expressed concerns over developments which undermine regional stability, including land reclamation, construction, and militarization of various features in the South China Sea. The United States encouraged Southeast Asian nations, in particular the claimant states, to continue to work towards a meaningful, binding, results-oriented code of conduct in the South China Sea. This is a crucial resource, the South China Sea, for the Asia-Pacific, for the entire region, including the United States. Over 1/3 of global trade passes through the South China Sea. And so we welcome very much ASEAN's principled approach. On counterterrorism, very briefly, Secretary Tillerson held discussions with his counterparts on the global fight to defeat ISIS and cooperation, generally speaking, to tackle the terrorism problem. They discussed the emergence of ISIS influence in Southeast Asia, the particular challenge of returning fighters to the region, all taking place with the backdrop of ongoing challenges in Philippines itself. And that was addressed by many participants with a vote of solidarity with the Philippines and a measure of expression of cooperation to help the Philippines with its current challenges in southern Mindanao. The United States partners with ASEAN and many others to improve security, undermine the financing of terrorist networks, share information, and prevent the emergence of terrorist safe havens. So just quickly, I mentioned there are quite a number of multilateral mechanisms, but in Manila, the United States participated in 4 major separate multilateral meetings. For the Secretary, he participated in the U.S. ASEAN Ministerial, and a couple of themes were addressed there. First, twin anniversaries. This year is the 50th year since the creation of ASEAN and the 40th year of ties between the United States and ASEAN. Secretary used this meeting with ASEAN to underscore economic and security cooperation and to welcome cultural and people-to-people ties and exchanges. There was a ministerial of the Lower Mekong Initiative, the United States and its 5 country partners that comprise mainland Southeast Asia, also known as the Lower Mekong countries. At that meeting, the Secretary announced a new Mekong Water Data Initiative. This is an important step in assisting Mekong River countries in expanding their science-based decision-making. And the Lower Mekong Initiative, comprised of the 6 countries, the United States plus its 5 partners, was a great opportunity to sustain and continue and strengthen U.S. engagement with this part of Southeast Asia. At the East Asia Summit Ministerial, this is the premier forum for security discussions in the Asia-Pacific. The United States is joined there by the 10 ASEAN countries plus 7 other Pacific powers. And that forum was an opportunity to address shared challenges, such as the North Korea situation, South China Sea, counterterrorism, but also to prepare for the Leaders Summit of the East Asia Summit in November. The 27-member ASEAN Regional Forum is the final multilateral forum. And at that forum, we and our like-minded partners reminded all participants of the instability generated by North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons. We emphasized that participation in the ARF, as it is known, should be based on respect for that organization's founding principles of promoting security, stability, and peace. Several of the members at the ARF reminded all of the ministers that the 2016 UN arbitral ruling on the South China Sea is binding on both of the parties to that ruling, China and the Philippines. There was also a statement issued at the ARF on fighting illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, an issue that's very closely tied as well to trafficking in persons and other forms of international crime. Secretary Tillerson participated in 7 formal bilateral meetings while in Manila, 2 trilateral dialogues with our allies, in addition to many sidebar meetings and discussions. It really was a very intense couple of days for Secretary Tillerson. Very quickly, before I get to your questions, a word on our bilateral cooperation. Secretary Tillerson met with the heads of government in 2 United States allied countries, the Philippines and Thailand, and 1 key regional partner in Southeast Asia, Malaysia. With all 3 countries where he visited, he discussed regional security issues like North Korea, South China Sea, counterterrorism, economic issues such as free and fair trade, promotion of mutual prosperity, and democratic values, including good governance, support for civil society, and respect for human rights. Specifically in Thailand, the Secretary paid respects to the late King Bhumibol during his travels to the kingdom, respect for all of the people of the Kingdom of Thailand who remained in mourning following the passing of the king last October. In the Philippines, Secretary Tillerson had the opportunity to visit the hallowed grounds of the Manila American Cemetery and Memorial, which is a really important reminder of the shared sacrifices this alliance has made for freedom for the better part of 70 years. And while in Malaysia, the Secretary celebrated with Malaysian officials the 60th anniversary of our bilateral relations and that important relationship, which has many dimensions. So his time in Southeast Asia was very effectively and strategically used for Secretary Tillerson. He worked with key partners, allies to advance interests in the pursuit of security and prosperity for the American people. The visit, we believe, was a good success for us, but also for ASEAN and our partners in the region on all of the issues that I've cited here. With that introduction, I'd be very happy to take your questions. Benjamin?
Thank you very much. Can I ask, please, that you wait for a microphone to come to you and identify yourself when you do, and also, since we're limited on time, please limit to 1 question.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for doing this. Nirmal Ghosh from the Straits Times. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the US, Australia, and Japan released a statement after the ASEAN meetings saying they wish the COC would be legally binding. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Thank you, Nirmal, and congratulations on your book on Thailand, a worthy read to learn about your lengthy stay in the kingdom. Indeed, the Secretary met with his counterparts from Japan and Australia. This is formally called the Trilateral Strategic Dialogue, a very helpful mechanism for the 3 allies to work together. When they met, they had the opportunity to discuss and strategize on the key priorities in the region. I've cited a number of them, including North Korea, counterterrorism, and indeed the South China Sea. You know, it is the view of the United States, and many of our partners and allies share this view, that a code of conduct, first of all, should be achieved. It's long overdue. The declaration on conduct was achieved some 15 years ago. It's time for a real, concrete, meaningful progress that can be achieved through a code of conduct. But such a code should be meaningful, should be binding on the parties to help clarify matters in the disputed South China Sea and protect the basic principles that we all agree upon and many countries in the region agree upon. We believe such a code of conduct should be negotiated as soon as possible. Thank you.
Take 1 more here and then go to New York for 1.
Thank you, Secretary Murphy. I'm Heya Lee from Yonhap News Agency. Secretary Thornton said before the trip that there might be an effort to revoke North Korea's membership of the ARF. So I was wondering if Secretary Tillerson had relevant discussions during the meetings and whether we can expect something like that to happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley, for your question. As I mentioned, the ASEAN Regional Forum comprises some 27 members. This, like the other multilateral fora that convened in Manila, is an ASEAN-centric entity. The architecture in the Asia-Pacific is built around ASEAN. So membership is really a decision for the 10 countries of ASEAN, and they work on a consensus basis. What we did in Manila, Secretary Tillerson and many of his counterparts, was take note of the fact that the ARF was founded on important principles, principles that involve efforts to achieve stability, peace, security, prosperity for the region. And indeed, the question was raised in a number of settings. Has North Korea, which has been part of the ARF for over a decade, have they violated those principles upon which the ARF was established? And this discussion was out for pondering, for consideration. There's no formal mechanism for a country to be suspended or removed from the ARF. And I think what we heard from partners is that the question merits consideration, and I think we'll see more discussion as we go forward. More importantly, what was discussed at the ARF and the other multilateral fora was the fact that the entire region is unified in the view that North Korea poses a serious threat, has ignored UN Security Council resolutions, in vagrant violation of those Security Council resolutions has continued with its missile and nuclear ambitions. And the region was unified in condemning those actions, in calling for full implementation, and encouraging, on the part of ASEAN, encouraging North Korea to abide by the principles that the ARF was established upon. Thank you.
Could we go to New York then for one question, please?
Yeah, hi, this is Manik Mehta in New York. To Mr. Patrick Murphy, the Philippine president seems to have abandoned the Hague ruling rejecting China's so-called historic claims on the Shoal Island in the South China Sea. Indeed, the Philippine president seems to be cozying up to China. Do you see the Chinese trying to break the unity of the ASEAN countries? And also, there has been recently an offer from the Chinese to supply weapons to Malaysia. How do you see that?
Okay, there's a lot there, but let me address, I think, first and foremost, the South China Sea question relative to our relationship with the Philippines. I think this is a good opportunity to point out that we have an alliance, some 70 years in length, and a very solid relationship, treaty-based with the Philippines, but also very significant people-to-people ties, perhaps deeper and more enduring than anywhere in the Asia-Pacific region. So we have a lot in common, many common interests, and we have the opportunity to discuss challenges in the region. Secretary Tillerson had the opportunity to meet with President Duterte while he was in Manila, and among the topics discussed was the South China Sea. I think what we have heard from the Philippines is they have a complicated situation. They have their claims, they have overlapping claims, and they've entered into a dialogue with China, both bilaterally and in the context of ASEAN meeting with China. Dialogue is good. We certainly encourage, and we heard from ASEAN a reiteration of the principles involved. While there is dialogue, the real path to solving the South China Sea must be done on the basis of rule of law, including the law of the sea, and a recognition that diplomatic and legal processes are important. Diplomacy is good, but being based on the rule of law is most important. At the same time, we heard from ASEAN voices, including the Philippines, that there is a need while dialogue is underway for tensions to be lowered by ceasing some of the provocative actions that we've seen, including the occupation, reclamation, construction, and militarization of disputed outposts. And so the Philippines was part of that voice. And I think that's what's most important. Your question about is there an effort to break up the unity of ASEAN, what I can refer to is that ASEAN works on a consensus basis. So the joint communique issued, I believe, on August 6th by the foreign ministers represented the unity of the 10 countries. The various chair statements that they produced after the ASEAN Regional Forum and the East Asia Summit Ministerial represent a consensus, if you will, within ASEAN. So there were very important consensus statements and views coming from ASEAN, including the Philippines. I think your final question was on Malaysia and weapons. Could I ask you just to clarify what you're asking, Manik?
Well, there were reports in the Malaysian media to the effect that China has offered weapons to Malaysia to the tune of $1.2 billion. This has also surprised many Malaysians, and I thought you might have some knowledge about that.
No, I think, frankly, I will refer you to the government of Malaysia, or for that matter, the government of China, with regards to their military-to-military cooperation. It's our view that China is an important player in the Asia-Pacific and does have and should have good relations with all of the countries. We have our own national security interests and good relations with countries, and I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Lu from Xinhua News. Yesterday, Defense Secretary Mattis said the U.S. effort to solve the DPRK issue is diplomatically led. So I was wondering, can you clarify for us, how does Mr. Trump's exchange of escalating rhetorics fit into U.S. diplomatic-led effort to solve the issue? Thanks.
With regards to pronouncements by, our president, I will leave to him the statements that he's made in the last few days, and our Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State have talked quite pointedly about the situation in North Korea. I have two things to say, however. One, our president has ultimately a responsibility for the safety and security of the American people, and that's first and foremost on all of our minds. Two, looking at what was conducted in Manila, this is very much diplomacy at work. It's hard work. There are negotiations, there are consultations, there are discussions. As I mentioned, gathered in Manila were several dozen, in fact, over 30 countries. And the preeminent issue on the minds of all of those countries there was North Korea. There was great unity in the concerns with the threats posed by North Korea, and a clarion call for North Korea to abide by the UN Security Council resolutions. There was a recognition of the August 5th resolution that was unanimous, 15-0 in New York, and a recognition of the statement by the ASEAN foreign ministers on the eve of that resolution passing that made the same call on North Korea. Abide by the Security Council resolutions and international obligations, stand down on your threats, and create a more conducive environment for a path forward to a denuclearized Korean peninsula. That was diplomacy at work, and those results demonstrate a very unified international community on this issue. North Korea was very isolated in its views at the ASEAN Regional Forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Hyun Kim from YTN at Korean News Channel. I would like to ask the related question on Trump's rhetoric. Actually, President Trump once this morning, the military options is locked and rotted. So is this means that the U.S. will military attack sooner or later? And my second question is, just the AP reported that the Ambassador Joseph Yoon has engaged in a back-channel diplomacy with the Sung Il-bak, the North Korean UN Deputy Ambassador. Could you confirm this?
For your question about the president, I will refer you to the president and the White House. I want to share with you the kind of diplomacy that was on the stage in ASEAN. And I don't have anything to comment about discussions or engagements with North Korea, except to say this. The North Koreans know how to reach us. My Secretary of State, Secretary Tillerson, has repeatedly noted that dialogue is an option, but North Korea knows the obligations and requirements. Dialogue is not something to be negotiated. Standing down on the pursuit of dangerous missiles and nuclear programs in defiance of the international community in defiance of the Security Council resolutions is what's at stake here. And that's been made abundantly clear. Now is not the opportunity for dialogue because we have not seen in North Korea a willingness to address these fundamental problems. What has been shared in abundant, strong voice from Manila was that the international community is unified with this position. So, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for coming. Our embargo is lifted, and please join me in thanking Deputy Assistant Secretary Murphy for joining us today.
Thank you.